You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. I hope you all are well. So this week, we have a really good brass tacks episode for you, all about supplements for menopausal women. I was skimming through some journals and some lay press articles, as I do each and every day, really. And I came across a bunch of the usual, these are the vitamins and minerals menopausal women need articles. And I thought I should do a show on that. So I called up Stacy Kazianchuk, a registered dietitian nutritionist that I've had on the show previously. And she connected me with her colleague at Genev, who is also a registered dietitian nutritionist, Katie Linville. And we just sat down and went through the most common ones that come up in the mainstream press, calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, etc., and what you should know. And we also, towards the end of the conversation, veer into a bit about blood sugar and insulin resistance and what you can really learn from a CGM, which is not all about food. So that was really an interesting one. So I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. I will note, Katie did have a little bit of a brain fog moment during our conversation when we were talking about plant-based sources for iron. She just had a momentary blank. I have been there. We have all been there. And she came out of it and mentioned some, but I said that I would put a link in the show notes for people who are vegans, and are interested in some plant-based iron sources. And those, just for reference quickly, they include lentils and kidney beans, tofu tempeh, those kind of things. So you'll find that in the show notes. And I'll also note that there are so many supplements to cover, and I didn't really want to do a Huberman-esque, 3-hour sort of show on this. So instead, just stay tuned. I'm cooking up another show that will cover more stuff that's hot right now in the nutritional supplement space. So stay tuned for that. Okay, as always, give us a follow on Instagram and Facebook at Feisty Menopause. Head on over to feistymenopause.com and sign up for my free weekly Feisty 40 Plus newsletter, which is for active midlife women. We go beyond menopause into all things 40 plus. And thanks, as always, for the kind ratings and reviews. I really, really appreciate them, and they help the show to continue to grow. And we've been at this, we're going to be going on 4 years later this year, so that's very exciting. Finally, quickly before we get to it, quick thanks to Heddas for their support of the show. If you're looking for a running shoe made for women using actual molds based on women's feet for women, Heddas is your shoe. Check them out in the show notes and you can get 20% off. Okay, enough of me. Let's have a few words about those awesome sponsors and get on with the show. Okay, Katie, welcome. Welcome to our show. I'm so glad that Stacy Kazianchuk connected us, because I've been wanting to do a show on sort of like not just supplements, but the micronutrients and all this stuff. Because I hear, and I'm sure you do too, so many women taking all the things, like literally all the things. And I'm like, do you need all the things? I think you need some of the things. So I just wanted to really talk to somebody who works with this audience and who understands it. And when she made the connection, and I've seen some of the literature coming out of Geneva, I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. So glad to be here.
So let's just go through it. I mean, like, if I were to come to you and be like, okay, what am I missing here? If I'm not taking anything, I mean, I know some women have a cabinet full of stuff, but like, what nutrient and supplement recommendations are reasonable for women in this menopause space to sort of have on their radar, I guess, is the best way to look at it.
Yeah. And of course, I have to always add in, it's so dependent on the person, obviously. Yeah. There's a lot to consider. So when I meet with patients, it's a very individualized approach. I want to hear past medical history. What has your experience been with different lifestyle, modifications. What supplements are you taking? What's your lab work? Lab work is huge. I want to know when's the last time you had labs drawn?
Mm.
What did they look like? What did you have tested? That really informs my decisions and what I may recommend. And I will say, as a dietitian, I love to take a food first approach as it comes in. So, by food first, it's like how can we prioritize getting these nutrients from foods, but supplements often play a role. And to dive into some of those areas where supplements really may be needed, vitamin D tops the list, right? And that is a very popular one. I'm sure you've heard a lot of questions around it. I certainly do. And it is, vitamin D is tough to get through our food sources.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a little bit in eggs, maybe cold water fish, but not a lot of it. We can get some from the sun, but there's a lot of factors to consider there as well. As we age, we may absorb less from the sun. If we live in a northern climate, we may not be absorbing it certain times a year. So that right there is a supplement that I often do talk about. What I'm finding is that many people are already supplementing with vitamin D. And sometimes it's coming in multiple ways through different supplements, maybe a bone health supplement and
Mm.
a multivitamin. They may be getting too much vitamin D. I have seen people get their labs checked and their vitamin D is over the recommended range.
Oh, interesting.
So there's a lot to consider there. You know, going into,
What would be the recommended supplementation range for that? Like,
yeah.
and is it D3? Is that the one that you were looking at?
D3.
Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to the recommended range, for most people, that will probably look like somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 IUs.
Okay.
That is the equivalent of 50 to 100 micrograms. So for most people, that range in general, I don't recommend going over the 4,000 IU range. But again, it's ideal if we can to know what that person's vitamin D level looks like. For most people, it's going to be very safe if they're only taking 2,000 to 4,000 IUs total. They're probably going to be in an okay place with their vitamin D level range.
And that is mostly, I mean, I know all of these do a lot of things, but when we talk vitamin D, I think bone health and muscle health. Is there something else that I'm big
Yeah,
ones that I'm missing?
bone health for sure, muscle health, immune system health as
Mm.
well. As we went through the COVID times, or what that is, ongoing,
Yeah.
whatever, that's really come to the surface as an important nutrient in
Mm.
general for our overall immune system health, which does go down a bit as we get older. So we want to think about it for that reason as well.
Okay. Excellent. Um, After vitamin D, I'm going to think calcium. And where do we stand on that? Because I feel like calcium, you can find things that are like, you need it, and then you can find things that say, bad, it's that supplements aren't good for you. Where do we fall in calcium for this audience?
Right. Yes. So our calcium needs do go up. After age 50, it goes from 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium per day as a recommendation. I do find a lot of people find it hard to get enough through food. So that's one thing to consider. If you can get it all through food, that's ideal. Really. I
Yeah.
mean, our body processes nutrients from food differently than supplements, and typically you can get more out of the food. However, you got to think, what does that look like? Um, for example, 8 ounces of yogurt has about almost 500 milligrams of calcium. That's pretty good. But there's several sources that don't have as much. And so many people get in the situation of, oh, I looked at what I'm doing and I may be doing maybe 600 milligrams of
Yeah.
calcium a day. That could be a situation where a supplement, maybe a calcium citrate, could come in, but you want to consider how much you have at one time. Um, don't take any more than 500 milligram at a time, right?
Okay.
Because the body will have a hard time absorbing that. You really want to break it up throughout the day if you needed more than that
Hmm.
to dose. And of course, always check in with your doctor. Just make sure this is recommended for you.
Yeah. And we think about that primarily bone health. I mean, that's the.
Bone health is a big one. Yeah. And
Mhm.
that's really, what comes to mind the most when it comes to calcium.
Yeah. So what might be next on our list when we're looking down? What women in this age group need?
Let's talk B12. Yeah.
Mm, okay.
So this is one I do get a lot of questions about, do I need it for energy? What do I need it for? And B12, so it's a water soluble vitamin, um, you know, not so much an upper intake limit as far as, overdosing. However, what we're finding is that even if someone is getting enough from their diet, if their body is not producing enough what's called intrinsic factor, which can happen as we age past age 50, for example, sometimes we're not producing that as well, then we're not absorbing B12 as readily as we should. So
Okay.
we need that intrinsic factor for absorption. And so somebody could be getting enough of the recommended amount, but then they're still low. So in
Gotcha.
that case, a supplement is often very helpful. How would somebody know if they're low? Well, definitely get labs done, B12 or MMA or both. Methylmalonic acid, that's another lab to look at for B12. And you can from there know, okay, I definitely need a supplement. I'm low or not. Some people choose to take one anyway for low energy levels. I mean, it is low B12 has a side effect of fatigue
Yeah.
for a lot of people. So you can get it from animal sources though, talking food, beef, milk, yogurt, eggs, cold water fish. So
But people who are heavily plant-based or vegan are much more likely to need to supplement this, correct?
right. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to get it in that way. Nutritional yeast typically has some B12 added into it, but yeah, it's very hard to get enough B12 with a vegan or vegetarian, mostly vegan diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the recommendations for that also go up at 50 plus?
That's a great question. I believe that they're about the same, but then it's just you may not absorb it as well. And
Gotcha.
so
Okay.
that's why you've got to, get that lab checked even yearly, just to see what is this looking like for me.
So before we go on, maybe let's take a little sidetrack and talk about like what you do want to see in those labs because
Hmm.
you've mentioned a couple times. Like what if you wanted to see lab work from someone specifically regarding this kind of supplementation, what are some of the high level things that they should be getting checked?
Yes. So I think it's very important to have routine labs done, even yearly. And of course, go by your doctor's guidance, right?
Yeah.
Always. But if I was going to recommend getting lab work done to someone, to know their full picture as a whole, for them to know and their doctor, considering nutrition, but beyond that, I recommend a CBC, complete blood count, comprehensive metabolic panel, CMP, but then A1C, hemoglobin A1C, that's going to be helpful to know. Vitamin D, the B12 labs of B12 and MMA, iron labs, ferritin and total iron binding count. Um, and those are some of the main that come to mind. Also, TSH, so the thyroid labs, TSH,
Mm.
T3, T4 even, are going to be helpful to know and look at to see what does that look like. There are some nutrition related labs that aren't going to be very telling for your status. So magnesium, for example, it's really hard to get a magnesium level drawn and to show if you're truly deficient in it from a whole body food standpoint
Mm-hmm.
versus, in a critical care situation in a hospital, if magnesium is low, they're going to replete it, and that's a different situation. So there are, yeah, again, there's some labs that are not going to be as telling or you can't get much information from, but
Yeah.
those would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
the top ones that I would recommend getting checked.
Okay, great. So speaking of, before we leave the B vitamin category because you said B12, I know that B complex comes up quite a bit with my audience, and is that something that you see or recommend?
Yeah, so B complex and a general multivitamin. Often I see people taking those together, I will say. And I don't recommend that because what the B complex has, the multivitamin will probably already have in it.
Right.
And while water soluble B vitamins are generally safe to take and there's not a huge risk of overdose, you really just don't need beyond what the recommended amount is. So B complex, I would consider it generally safe to take. It can be very energy producing. Take that supplement earlier in the day with a meal for best absorption too, or just best tolerance. Make sure it's a good quality supplement, but for many people, B complex, I've seen it be very effective and helpful for filling in nutrient gaps that you need. It's really hard to get every single nutrient we need from our diet every
Yeah.
day. So that's helpful in that case. And then it can be helpful for energy levels and overall how you feel.
Yeah, it strikes me that maybe for this audience, because as you know, my audience is, recreationally athletic. If not,
Mhm.
there are some pros in the crowd too. Like, so we use our B vitamins quite a bit, making our energy, correct? Like, I'm
Yes,
wondering if our need, yeah.
definitely. Yeah, you need to make sure that you are supporting your body for nutrient optimization. This comes into play very much with athletes, active people in general, right? And so you really need to make sure you're fueling, optimizing what your body needs. And that's where supplementing with some of these nutrients comes into play.
So what would be next on our list of things to consider?
So, iron,
Hmm.
have you, yeah, I'm sure, have you gotten questions around iron before or had the conversations
Yeah,
there?
I mean, well, it's an interesting question for this audience, right? Like,
Mhm.
so when I have covered iron pre-menopausally, it seems like a more clear-cut conversation
Yeah,
than I feel like once you hit sort of the menopause space, and you're not maybe menstruating the same way and things change. So how should this, and I know the RDA goes down. So how should this
yeah.
audience be thinking about iron?
Yeah, so the RDA does go down when you're no longer menstruating. So once you're fully in menopause, it's going from 18 to about 8 milligrams a day, your
Yeah,
need
that's
down.
significant.
It is significant. And so and again, it is a lab you can have checked to know where am I at. But let's talk about runners,
Mm.
they have a higher level of anemia typically. And if you're having GI issues, that could play in as well. So runners in particular may want to get their iron checked to know the status, even if they're postmenopausal. Um, Anemia can still happen for sure.
Talk about that because always think that's really interesting. So runners, like, there's actually an issue with the impact. Like, talk about like what it is specifically with runners and iron because I think that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I think that they're still trying to pinpoint full causal relationship
Oh,
here.
okay,
But there may be a combo between heel striking, breaking up blood cells in the
right.
feet, things like that.
Wild. Like when I read that in the
Yeah,
literature, I'm like, what? Like,
right. Yeah, so it's very fascinating, but it is something to keep in mind for runners. Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
very interesting to me. Okay, so knowing your iron, but don't just supplement blindly, right? That's not one that we want to
Yes,
supplement
iron.
blindly.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, iron. We definitely want to be very careful. We want to know your labs, honestly, before I'm
Yeah,
going to recommend an iron supplement. We can talk iron sources of foods. That is
yeah,
going to be my first approach. But if someone came to me with their iron labs, then I could speak more to supplementation potentially.
gotcha. And it like the best food sources being, I mean, I know we certainly there's meat, but let's talk about people who don't eat meat. Like, what are their best sources of iron?
Dark leafy greens come to mind as a
Mm.
big one, and there are some other sources from a vegetarian standpoint. I'm blanking on some of those right now, to be very honest.
Okay, I can always put
But
those in the show notes. Yeah.
I want to say even oh man, molasses, right?
Oh, I
That
remember
some
reading
iron
about
in it.
that. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So then you had mentioned magnesium before, and that is one that definitely comes up in the show for sleep. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because some women get the wrong kind, and that causes them some digestive issues that they're not that they don't want. So is everything
Right.
okay?
Yes.
You look like you were maybe.
Oh, I was looking at my supplement spreadsheet that I
Oh, okay, no problem. I
I
have an
have two
editor who can
screens.
like cut that
Yeah.
out, but I was just like, sometimes somebody comes in the room, and I was like,
Oh
I wonder if
yeah.
somebody. Okay,
No,
okay,
I have a supplement spreadsheet that I've put together, and magnesium is a topic of interest for sure.
okay.
Uh, for me working with patients and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, there are several different types of magnesium. I really tend to recommend magnesium glycinate, as I'm sure you're familiar with the general recommendations. Um, the different forms of magnesium do have different impacts on digestion, different things like that. But glycinate form is very calming, relaxing, and typically it doesn't have as much of a GI negative side effect. It can for some people. I have definitely worked with folks who it still very much did, but that's individual for sure. So you want to start low, like think
Hmm.
start 120 milligrams, maybe 240 milligrams. Um, you can go up to, I want to say 400-ish range, maybe
That sounds,
350, 400-ish
yeah.
range. Yeah. Um, safely. But again, start slow, build up from there. And it's generally, it's a safe supplement to take. It is hard to get enough magnesium through our diet. Hard also to check from a lab perspective on if you're getting enough. So that is one that's very common for me to recommend to people. And
And it's another one that active people need more of.
it is, absolutely. And it can help with stress, anxiety, sleep. I mean, everybody has a different experience with it. But typically, I might suggest somebody take a couple of capsules of magnesium glycinate, maybe 30 minutes to an hour before bed to support restful sleep, even
Which is really important for this audience.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about choline. That has come up a bit, and it's not one that I think of, or is that really honestly ever on my radar?
hmm I feel like this nutrient is starting to get more attention now. I'm not sure why just now we're starting to talk more about it, but it is an essential nutrient, meaning our body really needs it from our diet. It's actually important for heart health, memory, metabolism, and we need about 425 milligrams a day. So to put that in perspective, one egg has maybe 150 milligram, and it's in the
Okay.
egg yolk, the yolk part of the egg. Um, Salmon, 75 milligrams. You can get some choline from different veggies like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, chicken, peanut butter has a small amount, but sometimes it can be challenging to get that in without actively trying to. Um, and in general, I think about it for brain health. I think that is an important part of moving forward, keeping our memory as stable as possible. That's a nutrient that can really be supportive there.
That's good to know. And because that is also a thing that we hear a lot about during this time of life.
hmm
Yeah, during
Yeah.
during the menopause transition. Could um and would you supplement that, or would you get that in a multivitamin if you were going to supplement it? Or is it really just a food first?
Some supplements do have it. Ideally, food first if you can.
Okay.
You can purchase a good quality choline supplement on its own, and you don't want to get too much of it either. So stick to that
Yeah.
recommended amount. But yeah, some multivitamins will have it. So just check on what yours has, and consider if it's in it or not. What does your diet look like? Do you eat eggs regularly or, some of these other foods? And if not, and if it's not in your multivitamin, you could consider a good quality choline supplement addition.
When you talk about inflammation, which also comes up quite a bit in this audience, I think omega-3, which is actually one I take and one that has come up a lot on the show. Do you have thoughts on omega-3 supplementation?
Yeah, so omega-3, if you're getting cold water fish a couple times a week, so salmon is a great source. Anchovy sardines, if you can stand them, right? Some people
If
love
you
them, some
like them.
people
Yeah,
don't,
I love them. Not everybody does. Right.
Yeah, the smaller fish are great, the cold water fish that are smaller because they have less mercury. But tuna, halibut, cod, there's some good sources of fish that have those quality omega-3s. 2 to 3 servings of those a week in like a 3 to 4 ounce portion is a good amount to get through your diet. And if you're getting that amount, you don't necessarily need a supplement. So
Okay.
again, it's dependent on what works for you. I don't want you forcing salmon down twice a week if you hate it. So there are great options for supplements. out there. Nordic Naturals, Ultimate Omega, like that one a lot. Genève, we have a good quality omega-3 supplement as well in the dosage that you really want to see.
Which is,
It would be equivalent to that 2 to 3 servings a week of cold water fish.
is that a gram, 2 grams? Do we know like 1,000 mil? Like how much? What is the dosage that we want to see for omega threes?
Yeah, like 1200 milligram ish,
Okay.
is a good range to start with. Yeah.
Is there anything else for anti-inflammatory? Like turmeric comes up quite a bit in this audience too.
Yeah, turmeric is one that's very popular, and that is one that if you can take a first approach, that's great. I'd really want to see if someone is on any other medications or supplements before
Mm.
I'd recommend a particular turmeric supplement or dosing, but it is very much anti-inflammatory. Think about what else is too. Ginger, garlic, things like that are very supportive and anti-inflammatory. And these days, you can look up all kinds of information on anti-inflammatory ways of eating and diet. And, there's a lot to be said there. It really comes back to whole foods approach, plant-based eating, cold water fish is very much included in that. Whole grains, fruits and veggies, all falls in that anti-inflammatory process.
Is the concern with turmeric that it interacts with certain medications?
It can, yeah, it can interact. It's one that may be more likely to have interactions. So just always best to double check your meds with your
Yeah.
supplements in that case, particularly anticoagulant meds, maybe even diabetes related medications, things like that. Yeah, you just want to be really careful.
I often send people to like examine.com or consumerlab.com. Are there resources that you like when you're talking about supplementation necessarily?
For supplements, I mean, I personally use Natural Medicine Database. I
Okay.
use Memorial Sloan Kettering has a supplement database as well that I really
Oh,
like.
nice.
But in general, I'll typically say, let's be real safe here. Let's check with your doctor and see what they
Yeah,
say and work together. Like I can talk to the doctor too, and we can have a full conversation about what's best for you.
excellent. Um, Probiotics. I knew there was another one that comes up an awful lot. Like, do women
Yeah.
need to take a probiotic? I feel like this is one where we hit a little bit of a slippery slide into overselling.
Mm-hmm. There's so many probiotics on the market now, and it comes down to, okay, we've been learning about the microbiome the past several years more and more. There's still so much we don't know, but we are learning that it's very much connected to our overall health in so many ways.
Yeah.
So that's really where this all started, taking these probiotics. It's like, oh, we know this is healthy for our overall health, so more must be better, right? And just boost it up. It really depends again, like I've been saying all along with these different nutrients. So with probiotics, let's first assess, do you have any digestive issues happening? If no, then I really mostly recommend a food first approach, unless of course somebody's recently had antibiotics. I think it's always a good idea to supplement 60 to 90 days even with a good quality probiotic. But if somebody's not having digestive issues, have those fermented foods on hand, even the prebiotic foods are going to be supportive for our gut health. And if they are having digestive issues, what kind is it? Is it IBS related, constipation, or, what are we looking at here? There are specific strains that are recommended to help manage different situations. There's also so many different dosages out there. So you can find 50 billion, 100 billion. That's a lot. Some people may tolerate that. Okay, some people may not. So it's another one of those where you really want to be working with somebody who knows your full medical history and your experience to have a good quality recommendation on dosing and what may work best in that area.
So when you talk about, the fermented foods, we actually want to make sure that I always get a little, because the yogurt aisle I feel is filled with candy sometimes,
Yeah.
like there's been this candification of yogurt where it's just got like Butterfingers crushed into very sugar laden stuff, and I'm not even sure if there's anything in it. Like, what are we really looking for very quality foods with probiotics in them?
I mean, yogurt is one of the most common sources people will eat. I mean, you also have kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, things like that. But yogurt, since that is such a common one, I mean, you want to look at how much sugar is
That's what I was going to add, is the
incorporated,
added sugar seems
The added
problematic. Yeah.
sugars. Yes, there could be
Yeah.
so many. I really like Siggy's. I like Faye for
I like
brands.
cookies.
You can have your basic plain Greek yogurt or other kind of yogurt and add in flavor with cinnamon, maybe vanilla extract, berries, other fruits. Make it sweet on your own basis there from natural sources. It's really it can be a great addition to your diet, but you do want to be mindful of what else is in there. Yogurt aisle, it's amazing how many different yogurts are out there now,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
And a lot
And
of them
then
have
it,
artificial sweeteners.
well,
So,
yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, I think that going very simple and to your point, adding on when you get home to make it to your taste seems like a
hmm
good way to go. You know,
yeah.
the prebiotic food list has always struck me as one of the most bizarre things on the planet. It's just
Yeah.
like Jerusalem artichokes, asparagus, chicory. I'm like, what? You know, like
Uh-huh. Yeah. I
it
I
seems
know
very,
it's easy
very,
to kind of
very
random,
strange.
right? Yes.
Yeah.
Chicory root, dandelion greens, artichoke, garlic. Yeah, there's several foods that have probiotic benefits. Onions, though, leeks, really, you can look this up online,
Yeah.
bananas, things like that. But yes, it's in a wide variety of foods, so that's good. And my take on it is if you are having variety in your diet and it is very much a plant-based focus, you're
Hmm.
likely getting some of these good prebiotic foods. You can supplement there, but again, food first,
Yeah.
and meet with your provider on supplement options.
And is the ticket getting enough fiber when you're talking about gut health and
So
these kind of
fiber is a
probiotics? Yeah.
huge part of it. It's not the full story by any means for gut health.
Right.
I mean, there's so many things that can affect our gut health, even our mental health, right? So fiber is part of it. It's definitely not the full story at all. And thinking about probiotics, prebiotics, I mean, the prebiotic foods have fiber. Probiotic foods are fermented and they don't
Right.
typically have a lot of fiber. So.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking more of the prebiotics and they seem to be very fibrous, but yeah, to your point, it is not the whole story.
Yeah, there is a component in prebiotics it's escaping me in this moment what it's called, but there's a particular component of prebiotic foods that is what really helps provide that gut health,
Gotcha.
essentially. Yeah,
And then I was wondering if you had thoughts on some of the, adaptogens sort of come up in this audience, particularly ashwagandha. I have had success with it. I'm not sure if you have thoughts on or experience with those in this audience.
definitely. Yeah, we get a lot of questions about some of the different adaptogens. And so ashwagandha in particular, I've had a lot of people try that one. And there's, again, a lot of different doses out there. It's always a question of how much do I take? What's a good quality brand that I could take? And what I do find is sometimes it can be helpful for folks, especially at first. Over time, sometimes for some, it can even have an overly calming effect. Its indications are for stress, anxiety, depression, things like that. But yes, it can very much have a very calming, relaxing effect, and sometimes the dosage needs to be
Hmm.
because of that. It can be
Yeah,
too much sometimes, yeah. But for stress, inflammation reasons, perhaps even around 250 milligrams a day.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I know women who take that actually along with magnesium. They have these sleep supplements at night that seem
Yeah,
to be calming and seem to help with people's sleep, which is priority number one in some cases for
definitely.
yeah, a menopausal audience. I'm wondering if we can talk a bit about supporting or avoiding, when we talked about bone health, I also think cholesterol is something that happens during this time of life that all of a sudden goes up, and women are looking first to try to manage that cholesterol with their diet.
Mhm.
What are some of the supplements maybe that we've talked about or haven't talked about that you've seen sort of help with that lipid profile and help with that part?
Yeah, supplement wise, omega-3. So
Okay.
again, if you're not getting enough through diet, there research shows that a good quality amount of omega-3 is supportive to boost your HDL, that good cholesterol. So that's helpful. There are a few other supplements out there that may be recommended that may or may not have as much research behind them. Berberine, if you look at natural medicine database, it does talk about possibly effective for hyperlipidemia, so increased cholesterol. So it's saying that research shows when taken orally or in combination with other ingredients, it can reduce total cholesterol, LDL, and triglycerides and increase HDL. So there is some science to back that up. Definitely with that kind of supplement, check on it again, any interactions that may be with other supplements or medications you take, but there have been folks who find benefit from that. Another one is red yeast rice
Mm,
extract. Have you heard of that one?
I have.
Yeah, so this one again, it's a potential likely effective actually for hyperlipidemia at the right dosage. So there are some options out there, and I've seen some people have success with those, and some people don't as much. I mean, it really depends. So it's something to think about if you've tried everything diet-wise and LDL is still
Yeah.
elevated for people. Hmm.
Yeah, no, I had great success with a berberine supplement that it was quite dramatic. My cholesterol LDL alone went down 30 points, which is
That's amazing.
large. Yeah, no, I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so, but to your point, like none of these things work for everybody. So when people are like, "Oh, what are you taking?" and like, "Oh, it didn't work for me," I'm sorry, but like
right.
we are not test tubes, as I always say. Like you can't put like A and B in the same person and have it equal C. It just isn't,
Exactly.
unfortunately.
And supplements are different from medications in that for most people, it takes a lot longer to see a positive impact from the supplement than it might
Mm.
from medication. So a lot of pieces to consider there.
Is there anything, because you also mentioned like wanting to know people's like HbA1c, like for the blood sugar component? I mean, I know
Mhm.
berberine sometimes comes up for that too. Are there others that you think about?
Yeah, I mean there's potential that berberine could help with elevated blood sugar levels, other natural options. Even cinnamon has been talked about. I don't think there's as much research, but um in general, yes, that whole glucose hemoglobin A1C conversation. That's really important to look at. And I have a lot of people come to me and say, well, all I see in the media these days is that I must be insulin resistant, right? Because I'm in menopause. And it's like, not necessarily. We
Yes.
got to have those labs checked. We need more data here. CGMs are becoming so popular. That gives a lot of insight and detail. Work with folks on those too sometimes. Um, but yes, we look at total carbohydrate intake first. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Refined carbs is a close second that I would look at, and how your body responds, even to stress. Yeah, it's very fascinating.
That was I wore a CGM as an experiment for a while, and the biggest eye-opening piece for me was the stress piece. It was
Wow.
amazing to see like how my blood sugar would go up in like emotional, like, work stress, that kind of stuff. It is quite remarkable.
Yeah, and people
Yeah.
notice because some people are like, "Well, I ate the same thing multiple days in a row. Why did my blood sugar respond in such a
Yep.
way, like to be elevated on some days but not others while eating the same thing?"
Oh, I talked about that all the time. It was fascinating. I would be eating like something that, you know, 100% should not be bringing my blood sugar up at all in a spike, but I'd be like eating at my desk and on a deadline and, my
Yeah.
blood sugar's just going up. And then I would sit down with like something on a Friday night as I'm with my family, we're watching a movie and it's like pad thai and God knows what, and maybe like
Yeah.
dessert. And it doesn't do anything. It's
Yeah.
just like this
You're in
level,
relax mode. We're good.
right?
Yeah.
It's so, that was the most eye-opening thing. And that and the power of a walk, like
Oh, yeah.
walking after. There's a reason that traditional, like in cult, you like in Italy or places, you see people like after dinner they go for a stroll. It's amazing what it does to your blood sugar.
And I've seen that impact. a lot of people in a positive way when they include that moderate exercise post a meal. Yeah, they really just go together. A good
Yeah.
walk after a meal. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really remarkable. And I don't, I know people who get a little obsessive about with those things. So I'm always like,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
need to be insane. You don't need to like, be
Yes.
checking that thing every 30 seconds and, worrying about like every little excursion. But it was really insightful just to like look at that and see again, more than anything, like, wow, stress, the effects of, we talk about it all the time, but until you actually see it in that
Hmm.
like that, it's eye-opening.
Yes, it definitely is. Stress impacts pretty much every area of our physical health, it seems. And yeah, but I agree on the CGM, it can be a great set of date, like a great data point, especially if indicated if you have any concern or question at all about insulin resistance or how's my body doing and with
Yeah.
that whole situation. But it can make you hyper focus on it and get a little worried. And so having perspective from a professional to help you understand what those results mean is key.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I feel like we've covered pretty much everything that has come up in my universe and that
Yeah.
very commonly. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you thought this audience would benefit from hearing?
I think in general, I keep coming back to food, can we get that balance from food? And got to meet the person where they're at. It depends on your fitness level, your activity, just so many factors, your medical history. Some people can't eat a lot of veggies because they have digestive
Right.
upsets and issues. So it's so dependent on the person. So I encourage each person to take an approach of what does my health look like for me? What does my diet look like for me? Considering the big picture and seek support when you need it. Um, of course, I work at Genève. I love meeting with folks one-on-one and just creating a supportive plan, accountability. I'll meet with somebody maybe 30 minutes to an hour once every couple of weeks, and we check in between on how things are going. So really, if you're looking for support, reach out for it. There's so many different options these days, especially with telehealth. So
Yeah.
it's out there. Look for good quality, right? People who know about menopause, know about this time of life, know about what it means to be athletic, and very fitness active oriented. And that will make such a difference in not just physical health, but mental health long term.
What are people, let me ask you this, like when people come to you, do they usually feel like they do have their diet sorted out or they don't?
It really depends. Some people absolutely feel like I I think I have this all together. I just want to make sure, right? So
Yeah.
some people it's a double check on here's what I found from my own research. Do you agree? Because again, there's a lot out there. So I would say though most people do not feel like they have what they need or want for their health and for their diet. And usually that's because we are just so busy. We're
Yeah.
very stressed, a lot going on in life. And how do you prioritize having these nutritious meals on hand throughout the week? How can you do that? And so that's a lot of the conversations I have with folks on realistically how can this fit in a way that actually works and is not just a general recommendation. Not everybody can spend 4 hours meal prepping on us every Sunday, so yeah, a lot of people do come to us for help. It's menopause symptoms are raging, but also the nutrition side of things. How do I do this in my life? Yeah,
What are the changes that you make that you think make the biggest impact when you're talking about like menopause and the symptoms?
that's a great question. I do find the diet piece and eating every 3 to 4 hours, really talking about somebody's plan that's realistic to them makes a huge impact for people with energy levels, digestion. There are supplement additions that I've seen really work for folks as well. And so I think it's just talking about what that can look like realistically for the person and getting a plan how to stay consistent. I will say a lot of people
Mm.
come in, they're like, I know what I need to do, but how do I do it?
Yeah.
That's the hard part in staying consistent. And that's where accountability comes in. And that's really, I think, where we shine the most is providing that source of a listening ear, providing education is needed, but two, checking in on how it's going, you know, how's it going from week to week, month to month with these changes that you've made?
And then is it just a matter of them falling into another set of habits?
Yeah, oftentimes it's going to be a slow, gradual progression. I mean, maybe a small change a week, maybe 2 to 3 small new habits a week. Maybe it's, I'm starving by dinner time and it's because I'm eating lunch at 11 a.m. and not eating until 7. Let's talk about a balanced snack, adding that in. Try that for a week and let's reconvene after that and talk about some other additions. And then it's amazing the impact it has on energy levels and satiety and all of that.
Yeah. No, and just making, I think that's great advice because just making one change. I've talked about this a bunch of times, but it's been really revelatory for me. The biggest, most positive change I have made that is really it's made such a profound change in my energy levels and like weight stability and performance. Everything is really giving myself a big breakfast, like a
Yeah.
true it and I've always been a breakfast eater. I was never one of those people that would skip breakfast. I've always been a breakfast eater, but I've kind of gone from like I was always just sort of eggs and whole wheat toast and like some or whole grain toast and some avocado, which sounds great, but I would still be hungry at like 10:30 and I would still just sort of
Hmm.
be, whatever. And I've been like evolving on that breakfast and I have finally settled on, a bowl of steel cut oats with like pumpkin seeds and pistachios and fruit and something. And it's like,
Yes.
it's ridiculous. This
Love
is
it.
ridiculous thing with like some nut butter in it. Like it's insane what it is, but I am
Yeah.
not hungry until like 1. Like I have
Amazing.
great steady energy. I don't have those dips. Like and I feel amazing and my weight
Um,
is totally I don't have weight problems, but I've always been a little bouncy here and there and it's just like really stabilized. And I was like, wow, I feel like I have found this golden ticket that
it's amazing what changes like that can make, definitely. And I hear a lot of people say, "But I'm not hungry. I'm not hungry first thing." Start with something small. Maybe have another balanced snack ready to go 2 or 3 hours later if that works for
yeah.
you too. Yeah, that can make a massive difference
Yeah,
in
I mean, I
everything.
wake up
Yeah.
hungry because I don't, I eat a kind of earlier dinner and I'm active. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I have heard that too. But I will say, like this, definitely, like sometimes I'm like, this is very filling. But I do finish it because I'm just like, because I know it's like the benefit of it is it's been so great that it just, yeah, that's been
That's
like the
amazing. I
biggest
love
change
that.
that I have made that has made me. I just keep talking about it because it made me so happy.
Yeah, it's been life changing. No, that's how I feel about food as a whole. I mean, I'm so passionate about it. If you can't tell, I
Yeah.
want the world to know this changed my life.
Yeah. And it's just like so simple. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. Anyway, thank you, Katie, for your time. This has been really helpful, and I appreciate your insights and all that you're doing for this audience for women.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been great talking with you.
All right, we'll hit. Well, that's our show. Come on back next week when we bring you a live show from Emporia, Kansas. I am getting inducted into the Gravel Cycling Hall of Fame, which is honestly still kind of unbelievable and overwhelming for me to even say. And while I am there in Kansas for the Unbound Gravel event, I'm doing the 100. I will not do the 200 at this point in time, maybe ever again. Though, if you're ever interested, it's kind of one of those life-changing things. Anyway, while I am there, I am going to sit down with current Hall of Famers, 7-time world champion Rebecca Rush and Lifetime's own Christy Moan, who helped create that Super Bowl of gravel racing, Unbound Gravel, formerly DK200. And we will be talking all about midlife potential, performance, and promise. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, And please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.